In the introduction to Pirke Avos, we read, Kol Yisrael Yeshro Chelek La'olam Haba. Every Jew has a Chelek, or all of Israel has a portion in the world to come. Shenema Va'amek Kulam Sadikim. For your people shall all be righteous. La'olam Yirshu Aretz. And they shall inherit the land forever. Netzer Matai. They are the branch of my planting. Masa Yadai Lehispire. The work of my hands I may be glorified. So we know there's a Minhag Yisrael between Pesach and Shavuot, and it usually continues over the summer, but to learn Pirke Avos in between. And the question is, why is this an introduction to Pirke Avos? Why isn't this an introduction to Maseches Brachas? Why do we have to focus on Kol Yisrael Yeshol Chelek La'olam Haba? So some want to point out that we're about to learn Pirke Avos, which is, for the pious, it's a very difficult thing. It's Lufnim Meshurah, and we're teaching ethics. Ethics are very hard, and a lot of it is Lufnim Meshurah, and is more than it's more than is required. So therefore, you want to begin with some encouragement. Kol Yisrael Yeshol Chelek L'Olam Haba. Every Jew is special. We all have a direct link between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not like other nations where we need to have intermediaries, but we're all together. So they point out as well that we know, and of course, the world, the Olam Haba is going to differ. You know, some people will get back seats, some people will get the nosebleeds. It all depends what you do in this world. And the Rambam and others teach as well, it's not excluding Gentiles, because even Tzadiki Uma Sa'olam get a share in the next world. They observe the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noah. So what's Pshat, Va'amek Kulam Sadi, your people? So some point out that, no, your people, we're not talking about every specific Jew, that we'll get into. That, in fact, they talk about that, because the Mishnah gives exceptions to the rule. There's certain people who don't get Olam Haba. When we're talking about here, Olam Haba, we mean the collective, Kol Yisrael Reivim B'Zelazeh, Jews, not an individual per se. V'amek Kulam Sadikim, you all, the Jewish people, are going to get reward in the next world. And in fact, that's the lesson here. It says, Netzer Matai, you are the branch of my planting. So there's different words when we plant. There's the more classic word Zera, like Zriya when you plant, and there's the other word is Nata. What's the difference? When do you use Netzer, not Netzer versus Zriya? So when it comes to planting of the trees, Netzer Matai. When it comes to vegetables, we use Zriya. There's a fundamental difference between the way one grows vegetables and the way one grows fruit. When you plant a vegetable, let's say a potato, so to speak, the mommy potatoes got to rot away in order for the new crop to come in. In other words, you need the destruction of the old has to precede the success of the new. That's a vegetable. But Netzer Matai, in the case of a fruit tree, the only time you could grow fruit if when the tree is in good shape, alive and healthy. And when you cut away the roots, you basically destroy any chance of any fruits coming. And that's why it says, that's why we use the phrase, Eitz Chayim Hiya Machazikava, living trees are those who uphold it. The same thing happens that when it comes to the choices of the relationship, because when other nations of the world or other people, they want to when they're starting new, they want to get rid of, destroy the old regime and start fresh. However, when it comes to Klal Yisrael, we're always looking for continuity, like the Eitz Chaim. You have to get the growth from the older one. And that's why it says Netzer Matai. It points out that we know there's something, there's Tuma and Tahara. So, to become Tameh, you need two things to happen. First, it has to be Mukshar, which has to become wet. And then, it has to actually come in contact with something which is Tuma. That's the general rule. When something becomes something, it has to be wet and it has to come in contact. However, that only applies if, let's say, the apple is loose. But let's say the apple is still connected to the tree, or the orange is connected, or whatever fruit is, the nectarine, whatever fruits are that are connected to the tree, then it doesn't make a difference how much, if any liquid gets on it, or even if it comes in contact with tuma, the fruit remains tahar. It's immune to the tuma because it's attached to its source. And that's what it's saying. You're kulam sadikim. You're the branch of my planting. As long as you are attached to the Jewish people, you stay connected, therefore you'll remain tahar. And that's what we learn in the Mishnah in Oxen. That if a branch of a fig tree has been broken off a little bit, but it's still connected by the trunk, so the figs on the branch tree remain tahar, as long as, and assuming they come in contact with tum, as long as it's attached to the fig tree, as the lesson of the Mishnah, as long as the attachment to the bark will let the living sap flow through. This is the pshat in Jewish life. As long as you're connected to the past, so then you'll have a chance. And that's what it's saying. And therefore we know there are many different fruit trees. The work of my hands that I may be glorified, mazi yadol aspire, because each produces a different fruit. Each member of Klal Yisrael has its own contribution, whatever you do for a living, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, businessman, but your ultimate task in life is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what the fruit represents. As long as you're connected to the branch, and the fruits represent all the different qualities that people have, that they could all do, all be successful in their avodas Hashem. And that's what they say. As well, Kol Yisrael Yeshul Chelek Olam Haba. So, having the Gemara dealt with the laws of Mises based in capital punishment, then they go on to tell us all of Israel has a share in the world to come. Even those who are killed have a share in the world to come. Yet, directly after this, the Mishnah lists exceptions. Some who is kofar in the Torah, denies Tchiyas HaMesim, atheist, apikaris. So the Mishnah on one hand says, even if you're killed in capital punishment, which means you did a terrible thing, nevertheless you still get Olam Haba, but if you deny Tchiyas HaMesim, you don't. So apparently in Judaism, it seems to be, at least on this level, it's a much greater sin in false beliefs, because that can be more dangerous. There's only a limit to how much you could steal. So if someone gives you intellectual poison, like the protocols of the elders of Zion, that caused so many things to so many anti-Semites. As we say in davening, the Sifrei Chaim and the Sifrei Mason are open in front of us, so what we know, the Sifrei Chaim, why should the Sifrei Mason be opened up if they didn't do anything? But someone could have wrote a book of Apikarsis, and now they find it, so you could suffer the consequences now. Conversely, you could be Rav Aaron Kotler or Rav Soloveitchik, you have all your students learning, you continue to reap the reward. And that's why the lesson is called Yishol Hayek Le'olam Haba, not Be'olam Haba, because Like we say when you leave on a trip, you say, Lech Lishalom, not Lech Bishalom. Why Lishalom? Because as long as the person is living, there's no guarantee he's getting the Olam Haba. As we know, unfortunately, the story was Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, after 80 years, gave it all up. So we see there's no guarantee. That's why the Lashon is Le'olam Haba and not Be'olam Haba. So that's the pshat in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Kol Yisrael Yeshol Chelak Olam Haba. It's an introduction to get the people feel that it's too much for them, that they'll still get involved. And it says, V'amek Kulam Tzadikim, you as a collective unit are Tzadikim, and you always remain in the land. Netzer Matai, Netzer versus Riyah. Netzer by fruit trees is always a connection to the past. And Matzah Yadai Lispar, each person is like every fruit tree grows different fruit, so to each individual has their own potential. In the introduction to Pirke Avos, it actually comes from Masechet Sanhedrin. It's not really part of Pirke Avos. Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelak Olam Haba, that all Jews have a portion in the world to come. Shenemar La'amek Kulam Sadikim, you're a nation of Sadikim. La'olam Yishuaret, Eretz Yisrael will be ours forever an inheritance. Neser Matai, the Masa Yada Lispar will be with the planting, and your actions will always be, as we'll get into. So, why is this an introduction to Pirke Avos? Like, why not begin when you begin Torah Shabbat Peh, Mesechus Brachas? Why not start off, okay, you know what? What is this, some type of link to Pirke Avos? Apparently, if Chazal or whoever put this as an introduction to Pirke Avos, apparently there must be some connection between specifically with Avos. So perhaps some suggest that we know Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah, as it says in Pirke Avos. And Pirke Avos is really a unique book of Mishnayos. Most of the Mishnayos deal with straight halacha, but Pirke Avos is Lifnim Mishur Sadin, ethical teachings, and they can be very difficult. It's not just telling you the things you have to do. This is doing things telling you more than one is obligated, and therefore one might need the encouragement that they'll say, what? I can't keep all this stuff. Or some like saying is, I can't keep all this. It's so difficult. And you need the encouragement, especially for the beginner, because many times, like young kids, they start teaching Mishnah, they start with Pirke Avos. So they need the encouragement that you don't worry. We know it's hard, but you can do it. Like Rishoel Salanti used to say, it's harder to change one bad midah than it is to finish shots. It's not because finishing shots is easy, but changing one bad midah. When you're working on midos, ethics, it's very difficult. And therefore, Chazal knows how, Chazal realized that many people maybe don't associate ethics so much with religion and midos, and they need extra encouragement. Yet even for being a good person, even for having good midas, yeshul chelak. It's not just when you're putting on tefillin in the morning or putting on the talis, but it's also midas is just as important. And therefore, it's a reminder when we begin the book of ethics, Pirke Avos, that it's also part of the Torah, and therefore we need the encouragement. In fact, that's probably, and others point out also, it's not like you being a teacher, it's not like it's a bell curve. Call Yisrael, you might think, you know what, Olam Haba is overcrowded, everyone's getting it, so therefore you might think that every person can create their own Olam Haba. That's why it says Chelak. Chelak, like a portion, it's an uncultivated land. You could leave it as a swampland, or you could turn it into a beautiful garden or land. So it's up to you what to do with it. But Kol Yisrael Yeshel Chayil Olam Haba. So perhaps that's why we have the introduction here by the beginning of Avos. However, as we continue on, if you look in Masechah Sanhedrin, so first it talks about the people, let's say, who did things that deserve capital punishment, they're killed. But then it says, Kol Yisrael Yeshel Chayil Olam Haba, meaning, okay, but nevertheless, even those who are killed get Olam Haba, and then it goes on afterwards to list the people who do not get Olam Haba. Like someone who denies Tiyas HaMesim, someone who denies the Torah of Shamayim, etc. So it comes out, it looks like the Mefarshim asked that we're being very liberal on people who deserve capital punishment, that don't worry, you'll still get your Olam Haba, but people who deny Tchiyas HaMesim or the Torah, that we seem very overly strict on. More strict than someone who deserves capital punishment? It doesn't seem to be proportional. So we're going to be soft on murderers and soft on all that things? Like what? Why the dichotomy here? That by denying Olam Haba, so that seems to be worse than things people will put to death for. So apparently we see Hazala teaching us a very important yesod here. Again, usually many times actions are worse than the thought process, but we see at a certain level, we know by sometimes they say hearer of Aveira is worse than the Aveira itself. But we have here that we see that certain times Aveira is done through ideas. It's not just the thought, but that sometimes moral poison could be worse than actions itself, because actions are more of a finite time, a very limited time. Like, how many things could I steal? How many acts could I do which are bad? But moral poison, there's no limit to it. As we say in our davening, Sifrei Chayim and the Sifrei Mason, that the books of the living and the books of the dead are opened up on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So Bishlam is someone who lived a bit, who lived this year, now they're here. Okay, so let's review how you did. But someone who's been dead for 20 years, what are you opening the books for? They haven't done anything in 20 years. So whatever you decided 20 years ago, it's the same now. So why are you wasting time here? So the Mefarshim say no. Because on a positive side, let's take Rav Soloveitchik. Let's take Rav Aaron Cutler. You know how many yeshivas, how many people are learning in Lakewood, the biggest yeshiva in the world now, how many branches opened up? You know what the schar is waiting for Rav Aaron Cutler? Every day is a new day. 20 years ago, he gets a lot more reward now than he did the same thing. So all the students come, the students make students. They opened up a YU Kola, whatever the case may be, Talmid number of self. So that's a continuous thing. But conversely, it works in the negative as well. Someone, let's say, wrote a book on Apicursus, and never made the number one bestseller list. It was buried. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, after the guy died, somehow it became on the map, and it became a number one bestseller, and 1,000 people became heretics in that book. He's going to have to give a din v'cheshbon now. So it doesn't make it. But moral poison, it's unlimited. In other words, if you write something which is heresy and then people are affected, there's no limit to how much harm that could be. That's what the mission is telling us here. We see from the juxtaposition. You do acts that are bad, no one's saying they're good, but okay, you're going to get the punishment, but still, when it comes to moral ideas and thoughts, that's a lot more dangerous. In fact, and that's what we read. That's what we read a pasuk in Parshas Matos, that it talks about the neder, the durim. So it says that a woman who took a neder with her not to have popcorn, not to have the chocolate chip cookies, the ice cream, and the husband annulled her neder unbeknownst to her, and of course she couldn't. The husband knew the wife very well, and therefore, of course, the wife couldn't keep up with the temptations of the cookies and the ice cream. She went ahead and she had the ice cream and the cooks, thinking she, in her mind she was violating the neder. But the bottom line is she wasn't, because the husband took care of it. So she didn't do anything wrong in reality, because there was no neder, it was already annulled. Yet the Torah says Hashem yislach la, that Hashem will forgive it. In other words, you need atonement. There's still something that has to be atoned. That you did. What do you mean Hashem yislach la? What do you mean yislach la? What? I didn't do anything wrong. Apparently there was something done wrong. Something requires atonement, apparently. And yet we know the Gemara in Kiddushin, which tells us it's true machshava tova mitzaref l'maisa. A good machshava ends up good. Could end up getting credit for the maisa, but machshava ra eno mitzaref l'maisa. So machshava ra eno mitzaref l'maisa. So how come Hashem yislach la? She had a bad machshava to violate the neder, but she didn't violate the neder because it was. So machshava ra eno mitzaref l'maisa. So what do you need? What do you need atonement? You have the kasha.
Yes.
So there's three approaches. A1 is this pshuto that machshava ra eno mitzaref l'maisa, but it still needs a kapara. I mean, machshava ra still requires a kapara, but not the same level when you do a maisa ra. That's just it's not a kasha. It's true it's not mitzaref l'maisa, but it doesn't mean it's nothing. It still needs some type of atonement. That's Hashem yislach la. Others say no, based on the brisker rub and the stifler, going back to those sach mode. So you're trying to stay up, or you're trying to hear? So it's a big nafkamina. Do I speak louder, or I could stay the same? You follow? You have my kasha? But if it's a combo, that means speaking louder can't hurt then.
Exactly.
So it says by losach mode, basically the Rambam writes, is you don't violate losach mode until you took the chayvet asher chamad. Until you violate you don't violate losach mode until you actually took the object that you wanted. And then he goes on to say, and we don't get makas for losach mode. Everyone violates losach mode. The Rambam writes no makas. There's no good old-fashioned whooping. Why? Because it's a lav she'ein bo maisa. That's why there's no makas. Like any other lav she'ein bo. So the Rabbi goes crazy on the Rambam. What do you mean? You just finished saying you only violate losach mode until you take the object that you wanted. Then the next second you're saying it's a lav she'ein bo maisa. So what are you talking about? You had the kasha, you had the steer in the Rambam. So the stifler, the brisker rub, the many akwadim give the answer. No, really, it's an isser machshava. It's an isser belev. But how do you know how far you've gone? How do you know when you reach that threshold? Because there's nothing objective about it. That's why Chazal always look for concrete things. When things which are involved in machshava, let's say we don't make a bracha on things which only have a machshava, because who knows what's happening in your heart. That's the Beis Yosef in Hilchos Pesach. We don't make the bracha on bittul belev, because you can't make a bracha on something. Who knows? Maybe you won't do it. You won't do it enough. Or maybe you won't need it. So we don't want to rely on stuff which is belev. So the Rambam writes, or they explain the Rambam, the Yisr is b'machshava, the Yisr is belief. The Hadar not have gone too far. Achidikach hachefet shachamda. So basically, it's a siman that you've gone too far, but the taking is incidental. It's still an isser b'machshava, it's not an isser b'maisa, and that's the pshat in the Rambam, right? So that's what they want to say here. That really machshava ra inu mitzaref l'maisa. That's a pure machshava, something which is only a machshava. However, a machshava which also has a maisa. The bottom line, the woman ate the cookie, the woman ate the ice cream. Or it was a maisa heter, but still, once you have a maisa attached to the machshava, so therefore that makes it that raises it to a higher level, and therefore that type of machshava together with the maisa, that needs an atonement. So a pure machshava ra, I never acted on it in economy. I thought to eat treif, but I didn't. Okay, so that's it. I don't need any kapara, I didn't do it. But here when you have a machshava, she actually did do it. She actually ate the ice cream. And the fact that it was coincidental, but it shows she took it to the next step, like the Rambam right to Selevan. That's a higher level, and it needs a level of atonement. And A3 is the famous Klei Chemda that says that the Gemara in Menachos, which says that what if someone goes fishing and they know how to fish? So if you know how to fish and you trap on Shabbos, you violate the Isser Seder, right? You violate the biblical prohibition of Seder if you trap on Shabbos. So what happens if someone's fishing and lo and behold, in addition to the fish, they find a child fell in the water. But he had no idea. He had a mind to violate Shabbos and catch fish. But unbeknownst to him, he saved the kid's life. So is this person labeled a Machal Shabbos or not? So that's the Machlokas in the Gemara, and Menachos between Rabbi and Rabbi. And the Gemara gives us the lumdas. Do I go basa maisa or do I go basa machshava? So if you go basa maisa, you did a mitzvah. So of course you're not labeled a machal Shabbos. The pikuach nefesh docha Shabbos. If I go basa machshava, then I'm a machal Shabbos. So that's the discussion over there. So comes along the Klei Chemda and says this whole machlokas is only on mitzvahs ben adam l'makom. On mitzvahs ben adam l'makom, so then we can have a discussion whether you go basa maisa, basa machshava. But if you're dealing in the realm of ben adam l'chavero, so no one would say you go basa machshava. In the realm of ben adam l'chavero, it's result oriented. You go by maisa. Like the Sifri writes, if you drop a $20 bill out of your pocket without knowing, and an ani picks up the $20 bill, you fulfilled the mitzvah tzedakah without even knowing about it. Mitzvah strichas kavanah, the Gemara's examples are by shofar, by lulav, matzah. So the realm of kavanah plays an ikar role when it comes to ben adam l'makom. When it comes to ben adam chavero, we're less concerned with your machshava. We only care about, not only we hope you do have good machshava, but even if you don't, we're not so concerned. And therefore, you go ahead and it only applies to B'dan Makom. Like Tul and Sharyat, Tul and Sharosh, that'll be a different time. So this is getting back, so that's how we can answer the third approach is, like the Orach Chaim Chodesh writes by Yosef, by forgiving the brothers, whether he forgave them or not. He writes, he did. He says, "Atem chashaftam alay ora." Your plans were for bad, but God had other intentions. Therefore, don't worry about it. You don't need to be forgiven. But so, by Chavero, the focus is on result oriented. But the Gemara, when the Torah talks about Hashem Yitzchak, that's talking about a neder. That's a V'adam l'makom. So V'adam l'makom in the realm of Machshava needs atonement. So those are the three different approaches in terms of how you reconcile. Either Makshava Ra Ino Mitzdaraf Lamaisa, it still needs atonement, or you have the stifle of Briska Rabbi. A Makshava Ra by itself might not need atonement, but coupled together with the Maisa, that raises the level like Osachman, and therefore you need atonement, or the Bereda Lamakav El Machavero divide. But that's what we see here by the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, that certain times in the realm of Makshava is even more important than the realm of Maisa. When it comes to the realm of Maisa, you get killed, but Yesh V'Chayov Olam Haba. But certain Makshavas, again, it's not this. It's one thing you thinking heresy, but we're talking about more than that. You actually did the Maisa, you actually wrote the book, you actually taught someone else, and you influenced someone else. So that could be even more dangerous. Like they say, the book, the Protocols of Zion, like the anti-Semitic forgery they make. You know how many Jews have been killed and like pogroms because of anti-Semites making up stuff like that. So blood libels, all of that stuff can have more detrimental effects. That's the Yisod. We see how important the realm of Makshava is in theology as well. Even though it's deed versus creed, but we still have, that's the Yid Gimel Midos. We do have, we have certain theologies that we have to, it's one thing also believing yourself, but in terms of teaching others, one has to be very careful in terms of the realm of Makshava as well. And this to finish off, well, we started and then to the end of it says, Amech Kulam Tzadikim. And we're all tzaddikim, the Jewish people. And that's what it's saying is it says Kol Yisrael Yeshol Chelek Olam Haba will come to. But so what does it say? It says Netzir Matai. So it talks about planting. So in Chazal we have two languages of planting. We have Zer, like in the Lamed Tesmach, you have Zuriya, right, and you have like Netiya. Right, you have the two different Lashonas. So when we deal with vegetables, it always uses, the tia, nesker matai, vineyards, planting vegetables. When it comes to fruits, we use. Now, when it comes to vegetables, we say matai. But when it comes to fruits, we'll see. So by Zriya, I think by Zriya it's by the vegetables, and then by the fruits we have the netzir matai. So therefore, what's the difference between fruits and vegetables? How they grow? I don't know. I'm not a farmer, so I'm just basing on what the Sfarim tell me. I'm assuming they know, but it says that when it comes to planting a vegetable, so therefore, let's say you plant potatoes. So, in order for the crop to be successful, mommy potato has to be destroyed. If mommy potato sticks around, you're not going to have a successful crop. You have to destroy the old to create the new. Right? That's how vegetables work. But fruits work the opposite. If you cut off the roots, then the fruits can't grow. The only way fruits can grow is you have to build on what you have. You have to build on the old. So that's the difference between the Jewish approach and the other. We look around the world, you see all these people starting revolutions and taking over. Usually they end up worse than the other person. What's the first thing they do? They take the head guy out into the middle of the town, they assassinate him, they kill him, they put him in jail. That's it. The old Turks are gone. That way's terrible. We got to start fresh. That's the way a vegetable grows. When it comes to Judaism, it's Eitz Chaim Hi. It's the tree of life. We have to go by how trees work. That we have to go back to our roots. If you cut off your roots, you're finished. As long as you still have your roots, you can have a lot of success. In fact, as Chazal teaches, how does an apple become tameh? It becomes wet, and it comes in contact with the davar tuma. So that's how it becomes tameh. However, if the apple is connected to the tree, even if it becomes wet, even if connected to Tuma, it still remains Tahar. As long as you're connected to the roots, to the Avos, Meseches Avos, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you're connected to our Mesorah. That's why it's very fitting. Our next Mishnah is Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. That's another why we're bringing in this Mishnah right before. I just thought about that now, yeah? That Moshe Kibel, as long as you're connected to the Mesorah, there's hope. Even if there's a tenuous connection, but as long as you're connected to the roots, you'll always remain Torah and there's hope. And that's what it says, Kol Yisrael Yeshel Chevel. What you mean, Goyim don't get a Chelok in Olam Haba? The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva, Chasidei Umas HaOlam get Olam Haba. That's the difference. When it comes to Gentiles, on an individual basis, yes, Chasidei Umas HaOlam. But there's no guarantee as a nation. But Kol Yisrael, what do you mean Kol Yisrael? Anyone who connects with Klal Yisrael. There could be individuals that we said maybe they don't get Olam Haba. But anyone who's connected to the Mesorah, anyone who connects to the Jewish people, that's what the Amet Kulam Sadikim. The nation as a whole, not every individual is a tzaddik. We're a nation. If you connect to the collective Jewish people, then you're going to get Olam Haba also. But if you break off away from our roots, then I can't have any guarantees for you. And that's why it always says let Olam Haba. No matter what, it doesn't say Ba'olam Haba, because there's no guarantees. We know what happened to Yochanan Kohen Gadol, 85 years, and at the end of the day he was Toal or Rishonos. There's no guarantee until the end but you're striving with Olam Haba. And that's what we said, Chelok, it depends what, you can get the nosebleeds or you can get the front row seats. It depends what you do in this world. And that's the Yisod. So to summarize, that's what we have here. So to summarize, we have the Kol Yisrael Yeshol Chelok Olam Haba. Why is this an introduction to the book of Avos? It could be in the book of Brachas. The answer is no. Derech Eretz Kadmol Torah. Avos is a very difficult Masechta. We know how hard it is to work on the Midos, and therefore we need extra encouragement here. It'll be very discouraging. I just spoke Lashon Hara again. I wasn't nice to this person. We're constantly violating Badam Chavera all the time. You might think, what's the point anymore? So therefore we need all the encouragement we get. Don't worry. You're going to get rewarded for these things also, and if you constantly have to work on it. And that's what. And then we pointed out the connection between in Sanhedrin about the people getting capital punishment. Then we had don't worry, yet the people who have moral poison who deny TSMAsim and then they're going to lose it, because we see in the sometimes an action only has a limited impact, but moral poison has a terrible impact, and we went into the whole discussion, into the realm of Machshava, Hashem Yisrael, the different approaches there, how important the world of Machshava is, and that's why that you have to have the proper approach. What is the proper approach? It's Nesir Matai, that we point out. You can't be like a vegetable. A vegetable, you destroy you have to destroy the old. That's not the way the Jewish people work. The Jewish were Eitz Chayamin. That's why as long as you're connected, you can never become tummy. The apple can never become tummy as long as it's connected to the roots. And even if the roots are a little damaged, as long as it's still connected, it's still a go. And that's why it's saying, Kol Yisrael, the collective Jewish people, they have a chelok, and that's why this Derech Shrush, they say Kol, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, Kol Yisrael, that all the Jewish people have a chelok in the world to come. As long as you connect to the Avos, to Maseches Avos, and that's why we have Kol is an introduction to Derech Eretz Kadmol Torah. But also we see it's a fitting into how Pirke Avos begins. They're emphasizing the Mesorah. Anyone who connects to the Mesorah, then it's Kol Yisrael Shechayot. It's the Amet Kulam Tzadikim. There's no guarantee to the individuals, but if you connect, the Jewish people have a guarantee. As Jews, as long as you feel connected to the Jewish people and you follow in the way of the Avos, so therefore you will also be part of the Mishnah of Kol Yisrael Yeshel Chelek Ba'olam Haba.